Part 9. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Aichiji. Chapter 81. However, if the bullet chain can hold such heavy ammunition and still bite each other without breaking, it will be a big test for the material and design of the bullet chain itself. Google search reading. So Ruger just built a quasi-automatic loader based on an industrial robot arm that can feed 5 rounds of ammunition into the barrel of the gun. In order to avoid being penetrated by enemy fire and causing explosions, the capacity of the loader cannot be too large. Of course, so far, it's enough. Put the 5-round artillery shell magazine in place, and Ruger immediately controlled the loading machine to load. After that, while adjusting the height of the muzzle, he fired 5 shells at the flying mobile phone at slightly longer intervals. The slightly longer interval is to reduce the interference between the shells as much as possible. Playing them in sequence is to see which angle is easier to hit the enemy. Although Ruger's artillery control system is not purely mechanical like the old World War II artillery, it can only rely on various calipers similar to the mechanical sights of firearms to calculate the parameters, and then use the mechanical steering gear to adjust the height. But it is not advanced enough to use the optical sight system to aim at the position. Click a button and the fire control computer automatically calculates the parameters and automatically adjusts the muzzle for aiming. His set is somewhere in between. To adjust the muzzle, you can directly input parameters into the remote control device and let it adjust automatically. The way Ruger is used allows the artillery to have a limited shooting distance, so the parameter calculation is simpler and more intuitive. Probably, it feels like playing a shooting game with a controller, observing the target through the sight, and using a controller similar to a controller to move the artillery to aim. It sounds complicated but is very simple to use. In just 5 seconds, all 5 shells flew out. The muzzle velocity of anti-aircraft shells is much faster than grenades or mortars. Its priority is to hit the target, and its power is in the back row, so there is no need to install too many explosives in the warhead. The weight of the warhead is low, but the propellant uses the maximum amount that the artillery itself can withstand. The superposition of the 2 phases allowed this thing, which could barely be called a tail-stabilized discarding shrapnel, to fly at a high speed of nearly 800 meters per second. So when the 5th shell was fired, the previous rounds had already flown to the predetermined position, and the steel ball projectiles in their bellies were released towards the flying mobile phone. Luger, who had been holding the target airspace tightly through the optical sighting system, finally knew what was going on. He immediately took out 5 more shrapnel shells, set a consistent optimal explosion time, and loaded them. Bang 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 bang. The steel balls scattered by the 5 shrapnel shells were indeed unstoppable. They were so far away that even if the opponent kept flying to evade, one of them was still hit by these countless steel balls. There's a show. After receiving the system kill record, Luger couldn't help but be overjoyed. But then I felt a little guilty. If I had known earlier that the fin-stabilized discarding shrapnel shell I had developed was so easy to use, why would I have scolded people so much? But just when excitement and self-blame were complicatedly intertwined on his side, he suddenly noticed a group of tiny dots flying faintly from the horizon in the distance. He quickly adjusted the magnification of the observation lens and looked over. Sure enough, those small dots were exactly patrol bees. The mysterious reinforcements that he had been trying to avoid or delay in a hurry suddenly appeared in advance. With the appearance of these patrol bees, the remaining 2 flying mobile phones immediately corrected their directions and flew over there at high speed. Judging from the meaning, I am afraid that while flying, a radio signal was transmitted to the reinforcements. Seeing this scene, Luge couldn't help but sigh. It seems that this is the first time that I have failed a system task. For a moment, even though he persuaded himself that this was the most likely outcome of the plan, he still couldn't help feeling disappointed. Life is such an ups and downs. Just when he thought the success of the mission was imminent due to the effect of the shrapnel, he was hit in the head by a patrol bee that suddenly appeared. This is really. Wait, why is it that the flight phone has already sent a message over there, but the system hasn't sounded a mission failure notification yet? Could it be that he was afraid of being hit by the news that the mission had failed, so he hid it? With this in mind, Lugger quickly opened the system panel taskbar, only to see that the task of preventing the enemy from sending messages was still in the normal in progress status. The three green characters in progress in the upper right corner of the taskbar seemed to be satirizing Ruger's passivity. What's going on? Lugger couldn't help but be surprised. He turned around and looked at the patrol bee through the artillery sight glass. Could it be that this group of patrol bees is not actually reinforcements, but just daily patrols that come to patrol at fixed times and fixed routes? So there is no other flying mobile phone in their team, and they cannot understand the complex information sent by the flying mobile phone here? But that's not right. Complex information cannot be received. For example, if the base encounters an enemy and they need to send out troops to ask for help, they should be able to understand it. Why? But never mind. Anyway, it seems like this: as long as we kill them all before they separate their troops and go out to spread the news, the mission should be completed, right? Well, isn't there something like that? When you sneak into a certain facility, as long as you kill everyone who sees you, it means no one sees you. As an old player, he has done this kind of thing countless times. He is the same now. As long as he kills all the reinforcements summoned by the enemy, it means that the enemy has not been able to recruit reinforcements. That's right, just do it. After figuring it out, Ruger immediately got busy, constantly exchanging new ammunition in his hand, setting it up and then firing all 5 shots in rapid fire. The first to be unlucky were the last 2 flying mobile phones that he had found the best parameters for, and although they kept accelerating, they had not yet left the target airspace. Sizzle! Splashed by the heavy rain of steel balls, the 2 flying mobile phones both fell down, and at the same time, Ruger's car radio actually made noises. It seemed that the radio signals they burst out before dying also caused a reaction here. From the system's kill record, it was confirmed that the 2 were indeed killed. Ruger had no time to rejoice, took a deep breath, and got busy again. This time, he needed to aim the muzzle at the patrol bee farther away. Because the distance of the target airspace changed, he had to set different times again and fire reference bullets to correct the shooting parameters. However, he had just taken out 5 rounds of ammunition and was setting the timer fuse time by mental calculation when he heard the system ding-dong. He opened the system panel and took a look. He couldn't help but gasp. The mission had been completed. The mission of preventing the enemy from leaking information to the outside world was completed just like that. Don't they have to kill all the patrol bees? Why? Could it be that the patrol bees didn't see the 2 flying phones here? Well, it seems that the distance is a bit far, maybe they really didn't see it. But that's not right. The flying phones didn't send radio signals to them. Could it be that the patrol bees don't have the function of receiving radio signals? This. Life has ups and downs too fast, it's really too exciting. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 82. Ruger's heart was pounding as he went to check the 500-point task reward that suddenly appeared, but he didn't expect that the old noisy guy who had disappeared for a long time suddenly appeared on the top of the cabin. Google search reading. Seeing it suddenly appear, Ruger's mood became more complicated, and he didn't know what to say for a while. As a result, he heard it lazily curl its lips and said, "Tisk, why are you so slow? You just killed them now." Hiss, it hurt me so much. Seeing that Ruger was still stunned, it shook its head and changed the subject. "However, considering that you finally killed them all, I won't bother with you. Now, hurry up, go back to help the master." What the hell? Ruger was already very confused, And after hearing this string of incoherent words, he was even more confused and didn't know where to start. Fortunately, he has a characteristic, well, it can be said to be an advantage at this time, that is, as long as there is money coming in, his IQ will explode a little. He didn't hesitate for long, looking at the patrol B, looking at the system panel, he had to hit the 4-digit score, and then thinking about the radio that suddenly had noise before, thinking about the words of Lauquezeo that it hurt so much, he finally understood. It's you. You suppressed the wireless signals of those flying mobile phones, so that they couldn't send out detailed information, and they were not even discovered by the patrol bees in the distance. It seems that because it needs to get close or something to suppress them, it was also hit by shrapnel, so it said it hurt. Humph. Isn't this obvious? You just thought of it? Although it still said arrogantly, the tail swinging happily behind it exposed Lauquezeo's true thoughts. Okay, it's true. Ruger's guess was confirmed, and he was more or less relieved. Unexpected wealth can't be taken for free. If you can't figure out the reasons, it may be the sugar coating of someone else's sugar-coated bullets. I still have to eat, but I still feel uneasy. Now everything has a reasonable explanation, and Ruger is relieved. Looking at the proud old chatterbox again, Ruger thought of what happened before, hesitated for a long time, and said with gritted teeth, "Before, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Besides, in the end, it was you who helped to solve them. You did a good job. I will tell Tia later." "You, what do you mean?" Although the old chatterbox was a little proud and happy when he heard it, he immediately put on a defensive posture. I tell you, even if you say that, I won't let your evil plan succeed." "Yes, that's right. All of this is just a part of your ulterior motive. You actually want to win credit from the master and make her trust you more. Although she has been fooled by you, but, as long as I am here, I will not let her be completely deceived by you." The old noisy stuttered a string of righteous, but finally looked at Ruger with a guilty conscience. "No, but if you praise me more in front of the master, I can turn a blind eye." Before he finished speaking, he shook his head again. "How can you do this, Simba? You are the king of lions, the loyal guardian of your master, how can you abandon your duties for praise? No, look at his wretched face, it's too obvious what he wants to do to your master. If this goes on, if you are careless, it will be too late to remind your master to be on guard against him." Seeing that the old noisy guy was like a schizophrenic, talking left and right, but made Ruger look like an LS who was about to attack Tia, Ruger couldn't help but roll his eyes and ignore it. However, even though he said he didn't care, he couldn't help but wonder how this guy suppressed the radio signals of those flying mobile phones. What kind of existence is this guy? Let's say it's a ghost creature. Druids can also summon ghost wolves, but their summons can not only be seen by everyone, but also have physical attack capabilities. That kind of ghost, the body is obviously closely related to magic. But Xiao Tia's shadow links not only has no magic, but also can only be seen by a limited number of people. At present, these limited people have only one common feature, that is, they all master telekinesis, or shadow training ability. The only exception is Tia's parents. But there is no evidence to prove that the old couple does not know shadow training. So in short, the focus of the old noisy shadow is not the shadow but the shadow. It is like a shadow projected by a special light, which can only be seen by certain people, but no one can touch it. It is undeniable that such a magical pet is indeed very useful for little Tina, and even helps to make up for her shortcomings. Little Tia's parents really put a lot of thought into her. Hey. What are you doing? Hurry up. Speed up, the master needs help. In just a moment, the old noisy side finished tangling and started to make noise again. Tisk, it turns out that there is only a wrong name, Not a wrong nickname. This guy is so noisy. Ruger, whose thoughts were interrupted, complained fiercely in his heart. In fact, his actions are not slow. Confirming that the mission had been completed and those patrol bees were still far away, he gave up the idea of continuing to bombard those guys and returned to the driving seat. After all, it would take some time for those patrol bees in the sky to fly over. Even if the remote-controlled bombs on the female warrior's side were still exploding, it could not be ruled out that the camp here was doing some live ammunition shooting. Or it was simply a mistake by the guards. After all, those dog-headed orcs had accidentally fired their guns while playing several times before. So in this case, if Ruger took the initiative to attack the patrol bees, it would be equivalent to actively exposing himself and sending them a clear signal that the camp here was attacked. Even if it might not take a few minutes, when they fly closer, they can find out that something happened here, but it is better than exposing it now. So after Ruger returned to the cockpit, he immediately turned the car around and headed towards the female warrior. It was just that the previous high-speed driving had burned up the fuel in the tank of the small tank, and he was busy changing the tank here, so he couldn't speed up for a while. As a result, this gap gave the old noisy guy an opportunity to start making noise again. Ruger was somewhat impatient, but he thought about it. He had just apologized to him, so he couldn't turn around and start arguing with him again, right? After thinking about it, he decided to learn from Tia and develop a good habit of ignoring this guy. At most, when it was really too much, he would slap it and show the truth that its true body was a cat cake. Thinking of this, I don't know if it was because he thought of the old noisy guy being humiliated, or simply because he thought of Tia's skillful slapping of it into a cat cake. Ruger himself almost laughed. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi. Chapter 83. Why are you grinning? Why do you look so wretched? When Old Noisy saw his face, he subconsciously felt a chill down his spine, even though he had no physical body at all. But before he could finish his words, he suddenly wailed and jumped up from the cockpit dashboard and flew out. While flying, he said dissatisfiedly, "Why is it so noisy here? Did you turn that thing on again? Turn it off." As soon as Ruger heard it, he knew that the radio was transmitting and receiving again, and the radio waves caused by it affected him again. But he didn't turn off the radio, but turned up the volume. Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow dot. In his words, this is called noise hedging. When you hear the shouting of the market, you won't think the noise of the fight in the neighbor's house is too loud. Is the sound on the radio loud? It must be loud. Not only did Minerva's Save Your Mother become more and more standard and full of energy, but even the explosion of the bomb became louder. What does this mean? It means that the female warrior is becoming more and more proficient in using remote-controlled bombs, and can even rush over to collect heads as soon as the explosion occurs. Because she took the initiative to run towards the explosion was so loud. Ruger subconsciously pressed the detonator to cooperate with Minerva in the battle, and took a look at the kill record. He found that this time he finally got points for another mecha zombie, and he couldn't help but curl his mouth with satisfaction. Well, if he can kill one, it can be considered a balance of income and expenditure. In fact, it is not balanced at all. Although the points of a mecha zombie are not as high as the 30 or 40 points of a nightmare monster zombie, it is still 10 or even 20 points. Although his remote-controlled bomb is expensive, it is only 3 points per bomb. This guy is simply the spokesperson for the kind of profiteers who feel that they have lost money if they don't make 10 times the profit. Otherwise, Tia would naturally be close to him, because she subconsciously noticed that this man's soul was similar to her teacher. Catala, players who have played Diablo 3, all remember the pain of being dominated by this name. He is a profiteer who is no less than the second-generation kid. They are still father and daughter. And it is rumored that everyone in the rogue camp is not very fond of the profiteer kid, only the barbarian blacksmith Kiasi has a good impression of him, and it seems that there is some special relationship between them. These strange relationships seem to have been vaguely mentioned by the female warrior Minerva before. But it seems that Ruger has not thought about it so far. Maybe he was about to start, but was interrupted by Minerva's 2 consecutive roars. Who to save first? Save your mother. In fact, the first sentence of these 2 so-called spells is useless. Every time Ruger helped the female warrior detonate the bomb, he would exchange it for a new one and send it to the terminal block. The reason why he asked her to shout this sentence was not only to give her a sense of ceremony, but also to buy time for himself. Just like the ready, go, at the start of the race. But Minerva had shouted the spells very quickly before, but he didn't expect her to be even faster. This series of shouts almost made him unable to detonate in time. He finally caught up with the time and dealt with it, and then he heard the female warrior shouting again. Is this person crazy? Ruger hurriedly shouted at the wireless intercom, Minerva, slow down, it's too fast, that thing can't keep up. What can't keep up? That is, his own reaction can't keep up. Well, it's not that his reaction to pressing the detonation switch can't keep up, but the speed at which the pain he felt when spending money dissipated can't keep up. It's just that he spent too much money and felt pain again. Still, it's like this, the female warrior was stunned when she heard this, and reluctantly slowed down a little. In fact, Ruger also knew that the female warrior used the bomb so quickly, it was unlikely that she had awakened the gene of liking to watch explosions and fireworks like Tia. The biggest possibility was that she was under too much pressure and had to use explosives quickly to rescue herself. This corrected a cognitive misunderstanding that Ruger had previously had. He had previously thought that Minerva rushed out immediately after throwing the bomb, so the explosion sound transmitted through her radio seemed louder. Now it seems that she has been approached by the enemy and had to quickly throw the bomb as a defensive grenade, right? So Ruger hurriedly added to her, don't worry, hold on, I'll be there soon. As soon as this was said, the female warrior had not responded yet, and the old noisy who had just dodged came back again and snorted coldly. Humph, scumbag, saying the same thing to everyone, I am right to guard against you deceiving the master. What is going on? Ruger rolled his eyes. God has mercy on me. He has rolled his eyes less than he has since he met Old Noisy. But after calming down and thinking about it, it seems that what he said is not wrong. When they were still in the sewer network, Ruger was digging for the chariot fragments in the back and Tia was in the front. He said this several times. At that time, Old Noisy did not say anything. He should have focused his main energy on searching for the looming flying mobile phone. I didn't expect this guy to write down those words without saying a word. Don't say it, the situations of these 2 times are really not much different. Both times, the female teammates were in the front, and he was entangled with other things, and finally drove to rescue. Shaking his head to put aside the strange feeling of embarrassment, Ruger hurriedly added to the radio. I'll be there right away this time. The word this time also showed that he was somewhat guilty. But what he didn't expect was that the female warrior over there not only didn't respond happily, but instead shouted anxiously, don't come over yet, it's dangerous. What? Ruger immediately felt something was wrong. The enemy also has iron monsters like you, and they are bigger than yours, and there are quite a few of them. They only sent a few to deal with me, and I was forced to retreat, so saving your mother won't be very effective against them. I don't know where the others are hiding. But I feel that they are most likely to ambush you, so don't rush over directly. This. Ruger thought to himself, this life has been so up and down so fast, right? Is it really so exciting? Good guy, I finally got rid of the flying mobile phone that flew out to report the news, and a new enemy was released here? What kind of iron monsters? Needless to say, most of them are the tanks in the underground arsenal of World War II. If you are unlucky, some Tiger Kings and Mouse will appear, which is not impossible. With nearly 500 millimeters of frontal armor, even their own Matador anti-tank rockets may not be able to penetrate it. However, although it sounds exciting, he is not unprepared. Think about it, there is an underground arsenal suspected to be from a certain country in World War II, and there are light machine guns, general machine guns, heavy machine guns, flamethrowers, various artillery and other gunpowder weapons. It would be strange if there were no tanks here, right? Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 84. This country that participated in World War II and was also a defeated country, although there were endless good weapons in World War II, but if we want to say that the most representative ones are their tanks, aren't they? As a result, all kinds of other weapons appeared, including powered exoskeletons and anti-tank rocket launchers, but there was no tank? Lugger didn't have time to think carefully before, but in fact, he had already vaguely guessed that those evil spirits might use the hidden chariot as a trump card. Therefore, his previous vague speculation was now confirmed by the female warrior, and he finally felt relieved. Sometimes the fist that hits the body is not scary, but the scary thing is that it is hanging in the air and accumulating power, and you don't know when it will come down. The longer it stays, the more flustered the person being targeted becomes. Now that I'm sure the fist has been punched, I don't feel panic anymore. What's more, some tanks didn't realize they were all coming out to engage in a head-on blitzkrieg, but they actually hid and carried out a sneak attack. Needless to say, the cunning commander who controls these tanks has obviously never fought in World War II. Not only in World War II, their performance was that they had never fought armored warfare at all. As for hiding evil people, haha, I am afraid of you. Despising the other person in his heart, Lugger clapped his cheeks with both hands, squeezed out a bright smile, raised his head and smiled at the old chatter on the ceiling. What's that? Mr. Lion King Simba, please help me. You guy, don't look at me so obscenely, be careful if I scratch you. No, I'm just asking for a favor. Lugger, whose mouth could not help but twitch, tried hard to maintain his smile. What? It turns out you have something to ask of me. Okay then, give me a smile. Uncle, you are always smiling here. Lugger kept smiling and tried to speak with only his tongue and teeth. That's it? Then let me cry. Laoneokeo immediately replied. Oh, this is easy to say. Luigi immediately changed his face after hearing this. But it wasn't crying. I saw him take out his mobile phone from his pocket, look at his aggrieved little face, and start filming. Taya, when you see this video, your brother Lu may no longer be alive. I don't blame Lao Now Noisy for this matter. It's definitely not because it didn't help me that I died. Don't blame it for my death. Before he even finished his performance, Laoneokeo's fur was already on edge. His fur, which was clearly a shadow attribute, actually stood on end. You, what are you doing? Don't think I don't know. This thing is called a video. I've seen it from my old master. You guy, do you want the evildoer to complain first and falsely accuse me to the master? Lugger turned to look at Laoneokeo, smiled strangely, and said directly to him without saying anything else, I want to know where the tanks that are hiding and preparing to attack me are. The meaning is very clear, it is the threat of Chikuakuo. As he spoke, he swiped twice on his phone and drew an overhead sketch of the vicinity of the camp. Pointing to the barracks marked with simple square boxes to Laoneokeo, he continued, I need you to help me mark their locations. He didn't say a word about the rest. Seeing his confident look, Laoneokeo bared his teeth angrily, you guys are so despicable. But when Lugger raised his eyebrows and frowned, raising his hand to continue recording, Shadow Lynx could only shout, "I know." Gritting his teeth, it flew out. After a while, not even 5 seconds, it was back in the cockpit. But it looks a lot weaker than before. It seems that if it moves so quickly, it will consume a lot of money. Panting heavily, it flew to the cell phone held by Ruger, stretched out its paws and clicked on it a few times. Lugger quickly stretched out his finger, preparing to match it and mark the positions of those guys on the picture inside. But he didn't expect that the next moment, Laoneokeo, who had always been incorporeal and unable to come into contact with any substance, actually used his claws to draw claw marks on the picture on the mobile phone. He explained to Ruger while drawing with his paws. It told Ruger all the information such as the posture of those tanks, the direction in which the front muzzles were pointing, and the corners they were hiding in. After saying that, he didn't forget to turn around and ask Lugger, "Do you understand? Hurry up." It was only when it subconsciously said this that it saw Lugger's wide-eyed, wide-mouthed face, as if he had seen a ghost, and subconsciously took a step back. You, what are you going to do? Who are you trying to scare by acting like this? Let me tell you, I am not afraid of you. I'm helping you, it's for the master's sake. Don't get distracted. Hey, hurry up, don't look at me like that. After hearing this, Luigi rubbed his somewhat stiff face, trying to calm himself down as much as possible, and asked sincerely, "Didn't you notice? You just touched the phone directly." "What?" Lao Now Noisy was a little confused when he heard the words, but soon he reacted and turned his head to look at the phone in excitement. While it stretched out its paws tremblingly to touch the camp structure diagram inside, it murmured in disbelief. I can actually touch it? Am I actually tactile? Here, what's going on?" Seeing its shocked look, Lugger wanted to laugh but also felt a little bit sympathetic. "But, just a little bit. Is it possible that you are actually a two-spined salamander?" Ruger thought. "What? Why do I feel like you're mocking me?" Laoneokeo accurately sensed the subtlety. I mean, could it be that you are actually an electronic life form?" Lugger coughed lightly and expressed his true judgment. "Look, you can capture radios, suppress other people's radio transmissions, and communicate with electronic devices. What does this mean? It means that you can have contact with things like electromagnetic waves and electrons." With that said, Lugger simply exchanged for another thing. "It's not a computer or a tablet, but a small fan that can be remotely controlled and has programmable LED neon lights on it. It's the kind that allows you to customize when and which lights turn on, and you can even use lights to create stage effects." He turned on the fan and pointed at Laoneokeo, "Come here and see if you can control it." Laoneokeo was a little surprised at first, but when he saw the lights on the small fan lighting up in an orderly manner under Lugger's control, he probably understood. It nervously swallowed the non-existent saliva, hesitated again and finally rushed over. Soon, the little fan seemed to come alive. The fan head was shaking back and forth, and the LED lights were flashing like Morse code. "It's really like this." Lugger sighed, expressing how relieved he was. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 85. The truth is out now. Google search reading. This guy is not a shadow life at all, it should be an electronic life form that can be separated from its carrier for some unknown reason. Its physical carrier, maybe it has disappeared long ago, maybe it is Tia. In this way, its original owner, Tia's old father, Mr. Mike, is actually a time traveler. However, Ruger didn't waste too much time on this matter. The old Noisy has completed its reconnaissance mission, so it's okay to give it a break. It's having fun controlling the LED of the small fan there, which is much better than being annoying when it's noisy. So Ruger just said hello to it and put it and the fan in the back seat. On his side, Ruger directly clamped the mobile phone with the camp map on the special bracket near the dashboard and started to circle the information inside. Hiding the tank behind the barracks and preparing to shoot a cold cannon at itself, right? Even if we don't talk about attacking, it will be more powerful in defense, and we will not be afraid of the enemy's direct fire, right? Sorry, Ruger's artillery can fire indirect fire. After taking the time to jump back to the back row, adjust the angle of the mortar howitzer, and replace the new shells on the loader, Ruger quickly returned to the cockpit and continued the previous route. He stopped the car in advance when he was 2 corners away from the first ambushed tank. Controlling the tank to turn the front of the car in place and adjust the angle, he gently pressed the firing button integrated on the steering wheel, smiled at the front in the air with a mocking smile, and pressed the switch. 2-2. 2 more dull artillery sounds sounded in succession, and 2 mortar shells were fired one after another. When using mortars at close range, you don't need to load too much propellant, and the shells are not fast, so the sound will be more dull. This time, Ruger held the muzzle of the mortar high, at an angle higher than when it was used as an anti-aircraft gun before. The 2 shells flew out almost vertically into the sky, and after reaching the highest point, they both fell down, drawing a very high parabola, and fell to a position dozens of meters in front of Ruger. This is the mortar attack method of the mortar howitzer. There are many theories about why modern firepower similar to mortars is called mortars, and the 2 most famous ones are: one is that when a general mortar is used, the ammunition is loaded at the front muzzle. After the ammunition is placed in the barrel, the shell falls under the action of gravity, compressing the firing pin below, and then triggering the primer to shoot the shell out. The other is that mortar means close shooting, that is, close shooting. As for the pronunciation problem, it is said that the tone changes while it is catchy. Ruger has no particular preference for these 2 statements, because both statements are no longer applicable to modern mortars. But when he used it at this time, it really had a flavor of close shooting. On a normal battlefield, this kind of usage is unlikely to occur. It is not impossible to shoot with mortars, but it is unlikely to use mortars to attack tanks. It is not absolutely impossible, but the probability is very, very small. Tanks are frontal assault forces and offensive tools. The probability of hiding in a corner and firing cold cannons is not high. On the other hand, the mortar shells fly very slowly, and the ballistic characteristics are obvious. It is almost impossible to hit a running tank unless the latter does not know how to change direction. The most likely situation is that the tank itself has a malfunction and cannot move, or it is simply parked in its own camp without starting, and is attacked by mortars. Then, even armor-piercing shells may not be able to break the armor of the tank. Even if the tank is hit by a mere mortar, what can it do? Well, I have to say that the armor of the tank is not thick in all directions without dead ends. Under normal circumstances, the front armor of the tank is the last, because this is the direction to face the enemy. This feeling is the same as when Ruger saw that the situation was not good and installed explosive anti-armor on the front armor first, but not on the other 3 sides. In fact, it is the same. So the armor on the sides and rear of the tank is much thinner than the front armor. And the top of the tank is still the same, or even more vulnerable. In fact, apart from the different delivery methods, his thing is very similar to those anti-tank missile weapons with top attack functions. For example, the famous Hellfire air-to-ground anti-tank missile. That kind of anti-tank missile is still flying horizontally when flying towards the target. When it is about to hit the target, it will quickly raise its head and climb, and finally draw a large arc and attack from the top of the target. The effect is so good. It is not that Ruger is modest. If the mortar can really hit the tank more stably, the advanced anti-tank missiles that cost many times more should not appear. No matter how weak the top of the tank is, it will not be damaged after being hit by the mortar shell. The biggest disadvantage is that it cannot hit, or it is difficult to hit. But who can blame the ghosts for not knowing this? At least they acted as if they didn't know this. This gave Ruger the opportunity to bully the weak. That's right, he was just bullying the weak by using mortars to attack the hidden tanks. Is the ghost weak? There may be some discussion elsewhere, but it is definitely true here. And in Ruger's words, it is still a big dish that can give points. Because with the explosion of 2 shells, Ruger also received the chance to kill. However, after reading the information inside, Ruger realized that he seemed to have wrongly accused others. Kill the observer of the 75mm anti-tank gun on the chassis of the Panzer IV, the biochemically modified creature, the Cheetah Man, and get 15 points. There are 2 similar records in succession, except that the observer is replaced by gunner and loader respectively. Obviously, these 3 hands are a group of gun crew members, not crew members. From the long list of weapon name prefixes given by the system very considerately, Ruger can also see that the opponent's tank is not a tank at all. The 75mm anti-tank gun on the chassis of the Panzer IV, as the name suggests, is a 75mm caliber anti-tank gun installed on the chassis of a Panzer IV tank. This is not a tank at all, and it is even difficult to say that it is a tank. However, Ruger has not seen it with his own eyes, so it is not easy to say for sure. According to the simple concept, if this guy who was put together temporarily is equipped with a layer of armor on the outside. Moreover, this armor does not affect the normal firing of the anti-tank gun, so this thing can barely be considered a tank. In fact, the famous tank destroyer during World War II was actually based on this idea. However, the real tank destroyer has made some other adjustments, which is definitely more complicated than this simplified version. Speaking of which, the Panzer IV tank destroyer is just a Pak 39 42 75mm anti-tank gun installed on the chassis of the Panzer IV. If such a simple tank destroyer is placed in a corner and fired cold guns, it is indeed not a wrong way to use the tank. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-chi-ji. Chapter 86. Shaking his head, Ruger refuted the enemy he had just killed with some black humor, and immediately drove the tank away and headed for the second target. Google search reading. However, what he didn't expect was that as soon as he passed the first intersection, he saw a metal car with black smoke rushing towards him. He looked carefully and found that it was the simple tank destroyer whose main gun he had just blown up. How to say it? That car was as simple as it could be. It was probably the turret of the number 4 tank was dismantled, leaving only the chassis, and then an anti-tank gun with a forward bulletproof steel plate was forcibly placed. Except for the bulletproof steel plate that could barely be regarded as frontal armor, the other 3 sides were simply exposed to the air. This thing should not be called a tank destroyer at all, it can only be called a vehicle-mounted anti-tank gun. No wonder 3 members of the gun crew died after 2 shells from Ruger. With this kind of protection, the tiny fragments of the shells alone can kill all 3 unlucky guys, and there is no need for armor-piercing shells to take effect. However, it is also because of this that the driver hiding in the cockpit was not killed by 2 mortar shells. Look, they are driving a small car to seek revenge on Ruger. Although the Panzer IV is positioned as a medium tank in the other series, it is much larger than Ruger's small tank. Even without the turret, this thing weighs about 10 tons, or even more. So even if this thing no longer has the most powerful anti-tank gun, Ruger can't bear it just by hitting the Honey Badger tank like a bumper car. What to do? Turn the muzzle and hit it again. There is no time. But Ruger is not panicking. Although the small tank is lower than the opposite side, its own weight is also low. It was less than 3 tons originally. Although it has a mortar howitzer, the gun weighs only 7 or 8 kilograms. Including other parts, it weighs more than 1 ton at most. The total weight of the small tank is only about 4 tons, so even if the engine is slightly inferior, its mobility and flexibility are much better than the opponent. He accelerated, decelerated, turned, and drifted, and after a series of dazzling operations, he directly rubbed the edge of the car that hit him head-on and dodged it. On the other hand, the car had already hit the wall of the barracks next to it. The first tank was defeated, and the remaining hiding tanks did not seem to realize that Ruger had discovered them. They thought it was the negligence of the car, or Ruger's luck. Ruger liked this kind of enemy the most. He immediately took the time to give him a string of mortar shells for each group, and sent them to the west to enjoy a peaceful life. No, death. After a while, the 8 simple anti-tank guns hiding in the outermost circle were all solved by Ruger. On the other side, the old Noisy, who was having a lot of fun in the neon fan, also came back and asked to join the battle. And this time, not only did it not mock Noisy, but it was unusually cooperative, even obedient. The degree of obedience when facing Ruger, except for the somewhat stiff demeanor, was not much different from when it knelt and licked Tia. This guy is really a man who can bend and stretch in his bones. Ruger couldn't help but sigh after seeing it. This guy, when it comes to other people, he is all kinds of sneers, whips and rejects, but when it comes to his master, he is happy to be beaten into a cat cake. Now, because it finds that the endless electronic devices on Ruger are the best opportunity for it to feel touch and even enjoy life, oh, enjoy cat life, so it immediately set Ruger as its half-master. This is Ruger's judgment on its arrogance at first and respectful later. He wanted to say I still like your unruly look, but thought about it and gave up. When this guy is unruly, he is too unruly, and it is really hard to tolerate him. Let it stay like this. With the active cooperation of Lao Zhao, Ruger's actions in the second half were smoother. Although the number of the tanks hiding in the inner circle is slightly smaller, their configuration is much more professional. They are real tank destroyers. The kind that are wrapped in heavy armor all over. The tanks in the inner circle have found something wrong at this time, and immediately left the original corner, moving in coordination with each other, searching for Ruger's traces. Although it is difficult for Ruger's mortar shells to hit these guys after they move, it doesn't matter. He can also lay the muzzle flat and switch to direct fire. When these guys happened to pass the corridor in front of Ruger during the search and exposed their side armor, he fired armor-piercing shells accurately. After that, he didn't want to fight, turned around and ran to the side, and continued to play hide-and-seek with them. When the enemy hid in the corner and fired a black gun, Ruger used indirect fire to hit the target from a distance. When the enemy came out to fight him in a mobile war, Ruger hid in the corner of the enemy's must-pass road in advance and fired a black gun like playing hide-and-seek. It is not difficult to see from this set of tactics that the key hero is still the old Noisy who can perform the great reconnaissance technique of dimensionality reduction strike level. If he had not known the enemy's movement situation well, Ruger's results would not have been so good. After all, his tactics are not some fantastic ideas, it can only be said that he chose the right way of fighting under the right combat conditions. Rather than talking about how strong his combat ability is, it is better to praise how correct he was in choosing the mortar howitzer as the main gun of his small tank. From the beginning of the war to now, this gun has been used as a howitzer, anti-aircraft gun, mortar, and anti-tank gun. Although the main reason for this mess is that Ruger can make a variety of special shells that can be used at any time, this versatile gun type is indeed a great achievement. Overall, this can be regarded as a victory for the mechanic. He solved the ambushes in the outer and inner circles, and he was finally able to get away to help the female warrior who was still blocked in the central area of the camp. "How is your side?" He coughed lightly, as if he was not the ace who had just knocked down more than a dozen enemy chariots. "It's okay, I can hold on." The female warrior's voice was somewhat deliberately slowed down, and it seemed that she was pretending to be relaxed. "I heard that there was a lot of chaos over there, Are you okay? Be careful, those guys are very good at cooperating. While speaking, there was another continuous bombardment over the radio. Hearing that she not only did not ask for help, but instead asked him to be careful, Ruger's favor for this elder sister doubled. Such a reliable teammate, no wonder Tia said that she had the best relationship with this one among the three. Don't worry, I've dealt with all those guys outside. I'll be there soon. After hesitating for a while, Luger decided to speak his mind. Anyway, this was the truth, why should he hide it from his teammates? What? All dealt with? How is that possible? Those guys were so powerful that I didn't even dare to show my head. They were all dealt with. Luger's words were indeed lethal, shocking Minerva to tell the truth. Infinite Doomsday start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 87. To be honest, when Ruger first heard the female soldier say this, he thought she was encouraging himself with this exaggerated method. Google search reading. It was probably the kind of sister who praised her brother as if he had scored 100 points when she saw him score 90 points. But when Ruger broke through the two outer and inner blockades and entered the vicinity of the central square, he realized that the female soldier was not exaggerating. The three tanks wandering in the central camp blocked her tightly. With the female soldier's ability to jump back and kill with more than a dozen machine guns, it shouldn't have been like this. If she was facing the anti-tank guns that surrounded Ruger before, let alone 3 or 6 or 9, she wouldn't have been beaten like this. Those anti-tank guns didn't fire fast, so as long as Minerva jumped away before being pointed at by the gun, she was unlikely to suffer any substantial damage. At most, the shells would hit some dust, sand, and gravel, and knock on her outer armor, making a clanging sound. But here, she was really attacked by 3 tanks and crouched behind the bunker and dared not come out. All this is because these 3 tanks are not equipped with larger caliber anti-tank guns, nor are they howitzers, field guns, infantry guns, etc. Ruger recognized that thing at a glance. It was actually 3 high-speed small-caliber anti-aircraft guns. Using anti-aircraft guns as anti-infantry guns is really a traditional skill of this country. The 88mm caliber anti-aircraft gun is well known, but they don't expect that they have such a younger brother, 37mm rapid-fire anti-aircraft guns. If it were just that the guns were more targeted, it would be fine. The chassis carrying these guns actually changed the style of the old cars in World War II. It was actually 3 Cougar infantry fighting vehicles. The American infantry fighting vehicle is a new generation of infantry fighting vehicles developed by the country after entering the 21st century to cooperate with the main battle tanks to march and fight at the same time. The maximum speed is 70 km per hour, and the maximum reverse speed is 40 km per hour. It is equipped with an electric remote-controlled turret, which carries a 30mm automatic cannon, auto-on. Its combat rate of fire is 200 rounds per minute, and its maximum rate of fire is 700 rounds per minute. If it is fired continuously, it will definitely prevent the enemy's infantry from showing up, and can effectively suppress the enemy's anti-tank infantry and provide protection for our tanks. However, just like the wreckage of the Puma infantry fighting vehicle that Ruger saw during the archaeological excavation, none of these 3 infantry fighting vehicles really used the Rheinmetall 30mm machine gun. After this period of fighting and exploration, Ruger has understood why the firearms used by Gaimei are mostly old weapons from World War II, but also mixed with modern firepower. The old weapons from World War II were obviously provided by this underground arsenal. And it is very likely that there is still a certain manufacturing capacity here, at least the manufacturing capacity of ammunition is there. And those modern firepower are mostly the spoils contributed by the Mountain Special Operations Battalion after being killed by Gaimei when they came to reconnaissance. That combat battalion may not have had time to use other weapons, but the infantry fighting vehicles would definitely fight on the front line. If the attack channel they chose was not wide enough, even the Leopard 2 main battle tank might have appeared. In this way, the infantry fighting vehicles that had fought with the Ghosts at close range would definitely suffer the most damage and would not be able to remain intact. When Ruger was doing archaeological excavations there, he also found that the fragments of the infantry fighting vehicles were even more fragmented and in a mess. At that time, he just thought that the Ghosts might have vented their anger on this weapon that was more powerful and caused them more damage. But now it seems that they probably recycled this type of weapon into this factory first. The reason why they could leave Ruger with a small tank chassis was probably because they did not have weapons that could adapt to such a small chassis vehicle. Even if they did, the power was useless and there was no need. Not to mention the chassis of the small tank, even on the side of the Puma infantry fighting vehicle, the Ghosts did not install heavy artillery but chose a 37mm caliber anti-aircraft gun instead. The firing rate of the 37mm anti-aircraft gun is not low, about 150 rounds per minute. But the ammunition feeding mechanism is definitely not as advanced as the modern version of the machine gun. It should be a magazine-type ammunition feeding similar to the Luger mortar howitzer. So the anti-aircraft gun should also need a certain amount of reloading time after quickly firing a magazine. Unless they also use wild methods to build an automatic loader like Luger. However, whether Luger heard from the radio or saw it with his own eyes now, he found that their reloading time was surprisingly short. It is no wonder why the dignified female warrior Minerva was suppressed by the firepower of only 3 guns and could not raise her head. Strange, why? In doubt, Luger simply aimed at a tank and fired an armor-piercing shell. When he attacked the tank destroyer ambushed in the inner circle before, he had already leveled the muzzle and used it as an anti-tank gun. At this time, he only slightly corrected the muzzle to complete the shooting. An armor-piercing shell flew towards the Puma infantry fighting vehicle, but it was a little too high and didn't hit the side armor, but directly hit the turret above. But it didn't seem to cause a secondary explosion. This shell neither made it incapable of movement, nor did it penetrate the turret to cause a secondary explosion. It was likely that it could only cause minor injuries. Ruger curled his lips and was about to lower the muzzle to fire another round, but he heard a ding-dong from the system. Could it be that the gunner in the opponent's turret was killed? Thinking of this, Ruger quickly opened the system panel to look at the kill record, but only saw the following. Killed mechanically modified creatures, machine gun crabs, turret adaptation modification type, and got 8 points. Machine gun crabs. The ones in these turrets are not beast-headed ghosts, but machine gun crabs. Or have they been modified for turret adaptation? I remember that the original machine gun crabs only had 3 points, but this one actually has 8 points? This is so ridiculous. Although he said so, Ruger quickly figured out the trick. The turret on the Puma infantry fighting vehicle was originally an unmanned remote control type, so the size was small enough to be arranged like that. But it seems that this arsenal does not have the ability to restore the remote control turret, so these ghosts simply modified a machine gun crab and installed it as a turret. That poor giant crab was probably put into a sealed armored turret before it grew to its maximum size. The machine gun in its mouth was also replaced with a rapid-fire anti-aircraft gun. In order to make it reload faster, the ghosts may have performed many cruel transformation operations on it. It is probably these operations that increased the points provided when it was killed from the original 3 points to 8 points. From this point of view, the war potential of ghosts should not be underestimated. Before, they just installed gunpowder weapons on the bodies of insects. That kind of guys cannot be said to be useless, but they always care about the head and not the butt. Or to put it another way, the advantages and disadvantages are equally obvious. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 88. Think about the ghosts before. Google search reading. For example, the Caterpillar heavy machine gun. That is to maximize the operability of a heavy machine gun, but the overall mobility is almost zero. When someone gets close to it, it can only be played with by others at will, and has no combat power at all. Other types of ghosts, such as grasshopper cannons, machine gun crabs, and Vulcan spiders, have more or less similar problems. But this time, the kind presented to Ruger is the first time in history that ghosts are used as remote-controlled turrets and organically combined with mechanical weapons. This is simply a heightened understanding of the concept of biological weapons. At this point, the potential strength of ghosts is truly revealed. Google searched can. It is no exaggeration to say that they even have the possibility of competing with the Nephilim one day. Of course, for Ruger, the danger level of ghosts has also soared instantly. At this time, they are no less dangerous than the monsters of hell in Ruger's mind. However, these are only possibilities and potentials for the time being, and have not yet become reality. His heart was alarmed and he looked at Gui Mei with a high regard, but the record of silencing an infantry fighting vehicle with a single shot was not fake. The female soldier who was beaten so hard that she couldn't raise her head saw this scene, and she was relieved and cheered immediately. "Oh, you are so powerful. It seems that you have really defeated the ambushes outside. Hurry up. Help me kill these bastards too. You don't know how badly they bullied me just now. Look, my armor has been damaged by more than half." With that, the female soldier jumped far and jumped onto Ruger's small tank from behind the bunker. However, the chassis of the trailer that pulled her had been unloaded by Ruger during the attack and left in place. Now the female soldier can only jump back to the back compartment. But when she came back, she found that she couldn't get into the back compartment either. It's not that the compartment is smaller or bigger, but mainly because holes have been punched in the armor on both sides of the compartment, and the armor plates at the edge of the holes have been deformed and inserted into the compartment like steel pipes. As a result, the compartment, which was not big to begin with, has even less usable space. This gun hole was accidentally punched by Ruger when he was dealing with the ambushes outside. Despite the noisy dimensionality reduction reconnaissance, the opponents are not really all idiots, and they can still bite him back when they are desperate. At that time, he took advantage of the enemy tanks advancing in the corridor to hide on one side and fired cold cannons. Once, he had just killed one of the 3 tanks in a group, and was about to retreat, but the remaining 2 tanks actually collided with each other. Relying on the reaction of the collision, one of them quickly turned the front of the car, aimed the main gun at Ruger on the side, and hit him hard. This solid armor-piercing bullet directly penetrated the side armor of the small tank that was not hung on the reactive armor. Fortunately, it was the rear compartment, and there was nothing inside, let alone people. Apart from the damage to the car body, there was no major loss. He was also afraid that the female warrior could not hold on, so he did not repair these things and just ran over. Seeing this situation, Minerva, who had just complained to Ruger about her frustration at being suppressed and beaten before, could not help but tut a few times. "Ah, you little iron monster was also beaten like this? It's not easy for you either. I told you to be careful and take your time. Don't be so anxious. I can still hold on." "Yes, sister, you can still hold on." Ruger was too lazy to pierce her, thinking that if you really could hold on, sister, why did you jump over so quickly? Could it be that you missed me? It's because you were suppressed too badly and wanted to come over for revenge. However, he was not going to say these words, but quickly operated the small tank to deal with the last 2 infantry fighting vehicles and the thing with only the chassis left without the turret. While dealing with the situation, he asked Minerva another question. "What happened to you just now? Why are there so many chariots suddenly?" "Hey," hearing Ruger say this, the female warrior immediately became proud. "I tell you, your savior mother is really powerful. I can kill 2 of the guys who besieged me before with one throw, and those grandsons can no longer suppress me. But, Their leader seems to know your kind of spell and shouted a few similar words at me. I was afraid that he would break your spell, so I tried it again and found that it still worked, so I was relieved. Hey, that guy is just a zombie, but he knows how to use spells to scare people. His IQ is really high. Listening to this, Ruger's face changed color. Well, the heroic female warrior seems to have suddenly gained a chatterbox attribute recently. She chants and casts spells without interruption from the beginning. This matter really gives Ruger a headache. But that's not all. What really concerned him was the sentence, "The leader seemed to know your spell." What does this mean? It means that the zombie not only knows a certain European language, but also Ruger's native language. Then what? Ruger asked with a somewhat strange look. Then, Minerva curled her lips, then he found that he couldn't beat me, so he retreated to the tin house in a rage. Then, those tin monsters rushed out. Ruger nodded and looked at the 3 remaining Cougar infantry fighting vehicles around him. So, that guy is in these iron monsters. He knew that at least there were no mecha zombies on the old World War II cars that surrounded him in 2 circles. The system kill records were mostly about killing beast-headed people. So although he asked this question, he didn't think that the mecha zombies would run to these Cougar infantry fighting vehicles. For the previous series of changes, he was more inclined to this understanding. The beast-headed guards who originally guarded the camp were useless and collapsed in one battle. The mecha zombies who discovered this had to rush out with simple weapons and personally appeared to support the battle. After stabilizing the front line, they found that they could not solve the enemy with infantry power, so they chose to retreat and make room for the tanks. The reason why Ruger asked the female warrior that sentence was mainly to see if she had any other information. For example, if she saw those guys climb onto the chariot with her own eyes, then Ruger's previous speculation was obviously wrong. However, I don't know, the female warrior spread her hands, I didn't see it. Ruger thought to himself that it was true. After confirming that his guess was not wrong for the time being, he stopped talking and put all his energy back into the battle. For a while, the small chariot danced happily again. He was controlling the chariot to dance, and then he remembered that there was still a female warrior who had not entered the carriage, and hurriedly added to her, "Hold on. Forget it, I think I'll get off." As soon as the voice fell, the female warrior didn't know whether she jumped out or was thrown off by the chariot, and disappeared without a trace. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 89. As soon as the female warrior jumped out of the car, the infantry fighting vehicle on the opposite side, which had been unable to do anything about the lugger, immediately found a soft persimmon to squeeze. 237mm anti-aircraft guns immediately chased her. The female warrior was not annoyed when she saw this, and yelled at Lugger, "Come on, I've helped you attract firepower, don't waste the opportunity." After saying that, he led the 2 cannons and ran in the opposite direction of Lugger. Seeing her like this, Luge couldn't help but laugh. Shaking his head half in amusement and half in admiration, he quickly seized this opportunity and fired a second shot at an infantry fighting vehicle that accidentally exposed a flaw. His current 88mm mortar howitzer, if no adjustments are made, will aim at the center of the small tank 100 meters away and at a height of 2 meters. It feels a bit like the 0 point of a rifle. The so-called 0 point, for example, if it is set at 100 meters, then when using this rifle to design a 100-meter target, the bullet should hit the target. Of course, this is based on eliminating interference from factors such as instability and ignoring mechanical errors in firearm components. The bullet trajectory actually flies in a parabola, so when aiming at a target before or after the 0 point, the bullet's impact point will always be slightly different on the vertical axis compared to the aiming position. Bullets are like this, and so are cannonballs. Ruger's artillery itself also has an observation and sighting system, and the system itself also has a 0-point setting. However, in order to simplify the operation, he now relies on remote control to control the artillery, so he might as well combine the two into one and simplify the new 0-point. The final result is like this. When he attacks an enemy 100 meters away from him, the cannonball should land exactly 2 meters high on that guy. The Puma infantry fighting vehicle is about 3 meters tall including the turret. If Ruger sets the 0-point like this, the shells can hit the opponent within about 60 meters to 200 meters. If the distance was any closer, the shells he fired would probably fly out against the chariot's scalp. No matter how far the distance is, those shells can only hit the opponent's tracks. This is why Luger had been following 3 infantry fighting vehicles, Zhou, but had not fired yet. If the distance is wrong, even if the gun is fired, it will not hit. However, with the help of the female warrior who suddenly flew out, Luger immediately felt relaxed. The 2 infantry fighting vehicles with still working turrets turned their guns around to attack the female warriors, completely ignoring Ruger. Naturally, Luger would not be polite here and threw out the shells like water for free. Boom boom boom. With one round of rapid fire, the engine of an infantry fighting vehicle, the driver, and the turret commander were all killed. Without the command of the turret commander, the actual body of the turret, the surgically modified machine gun crab, could only rely on instinct to continue spitting out tongues of fire straight ahead. Its eyes were still chasing the figure of the female warrior, and it acted according to the last order issued by the commander, and its artillery kept firing at Minerva. Seeing that one of his teammates was easily killed again, the last intact infantry fighting vehicle immediately turned its muzzle and pointed it at Luger. However, their previous 2 cannon salvos failed to catch the Luger tank, and now that there was only one gun left, it was naturally even more impossible. Ruger drew an arc around the central square, then passed the range of the 37mm rapid-fire cannon, and turned behind the body of the Crip fighter that was still chasing the female soldier and firing. After slightly correcting the muzzle, Ruger this time sent an armor-piercing round directly towards the still-firing turret. This bullet penetrated the sole as soon as it was fired, and finally sent the modified machine gun crab, which was still working mechanically, to sleep forever. Pretty. The female warrior over there was out of danger and couldn't help but shout hello to Luger. 2 of the opponent's 3 cannons have been eliminated by Luger, and there is only one rapid-fire cannon left, which is even less worrying. In addition, the female warrior who had been suppressed and beaten now had the support of her teammates. The weak energy she had been beaten before immediately turned into full of fighting spirit, and she pressed forward desperately. The last 37mm rapid-fire cannon was just chasing the female soldier and fighting back. If it dared to turn around and hit the Luger, the female soldier would immediately rush over and chop it with a knife. Seeing this situation, it had to turn back to deal with the female warrior, and then let Ruger seize the opportunity to adjust the muzzle and fire more deadly armor-piercing bullets at it. Just like that, his 2 fists were hard to defeat in 4 hands. The guy's muzzle swung back and forth. Finally, he accidentally chopped the barrel into several pieces before he could do it in time. The barrel was cut off completely, and the artillery itself was still firing, but the shells it fired had no idea where to fly. There was even one shot that flew directly diagonally downward, penetrated his own front armor, and almost hit the front driver's seat or the deputy command position. Realizing that he had almost killed himself, the forward turret commander quickly asked the machine gun crab turret to stop firing. It's just that as soon as the previous crisis was resolved, the next crisis followed. Taking advantage of this time, Luger had already floated to their side. Seeing that it relaxed, he immediately fired another armor-piercing round, sending this group of ghosts to the west to reunite. The two infantry fighting vehicles with guns were both eliminated, leaving only the earliest one whose turret was killed. Lugger was about to turn around to find it, but saw that the female soldier over there had already caught up and stuffed a remote-controlled bomb along the narrow slit in the cockpit. Then, he heard the female warrior yell, "Save your mother." His left hand twitched subconsciously, and the cockpit of the last remaining operational tank was blown away. At this point, the two finally eliminated all enemy units in the underground arsenal camp. As a result, even Ruger could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. The battle took no more than 10 minutes, but the battle was fierce and the situation was tragic. It was no exaggeration to say that it was like a year. The patrol bees that had flown from afar before were about to fly over the camp during this time. Looking up, Ruger shook his head helplessly and disdainfully, and decided to ignore them for the time being. After calming down, he hurriedly asked Lao Guozhao, "How is Tia doing? Have you found that Sarah?" Seeing Lao Guozhao shaking his head, he sighed helplessly and continued, "Okay, then where is she now? Let's go and help her find her." Hearing what he said, Lao Guozhao quickly narrowed his eyes, as if searching and thinking for a while, and then turned his head to a barracks not far ahead. "Go there, there is a passage leading to the underground secret room. Go in from there and you will catch up with the master soon." Ruger was a little helpless about the fact that there was another underground secret room under the camp when this place was already an underground cave. "No way, it's strange that you don't like to dig holes." He just shook his head and called the female warrior to go there together. "Hey, what should we do with those flying insects that suddenly appeared in the sky?" Seeing that he didn't even look at the patrol bees that just flew over, the female warrior couldn't help shouting. However, the next moment, she looked back at the patrol bees, but unexpectedly found that they unexpectedly stopped outside before flying into the sky above the camp. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 90. Those patrol bees just flew back and forth around the outer circle of the camp, but no one dared to enter the camp. Google search reading. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network rightward arrow. It's not impossible. One of them may have been tired from flying and accidentally flew in halfway. However, for this half of the body, the teammates around it actually raised their butcher knives, bee stings, towards it, and killed it, shot down, in 2 or 3 blows. This is, the female warrior couldn't help but exclaimed. "Huh." Lugger quickly took a look, his eyes changed light and dark for a while, then he turned around and returned to the car and said, "Ignore them for now. Who knows what they are doing? Maybe they don't dare to come in without receiving orders. Anyway, we don't have the ability to kill them all at once. Rather than waste time dealing with them, only to hurt them and force them to report the news, we might as well take advantage of this time to help Tia find the blood raven Sarah. At least it gives us a little more time. Is that so? Okay." The female warrior thought for a while and felt that she had no other choice, so she stopped worrying. With this relaxed attitude, it simply rushed directly to the barracks, picked up the long-handled sword and slashed at the door. Blah blah blah. The steel-edged long-handled sword in the female warrior's hand, which had always been invincible, actually failed to open the door. How is it possible? Is this door actually a wall? The female soldier chopped around the barracks without believing in evil, but found that she could not split the hard steel plate anywhere. On the contrary, Lugger, who was behind, had jumped into the back compartment again. With the help of Lao Naoka, who had the ability to see through eyes, he adjusted the cannon and fired a shot at the real weak point of the door. Boom! The previously rock-solid barracks door was hit on the door axis by Lugger and immediately lost its balance. When he followed the same pattern and fired 6 shells, the door itself trembled and fell backwards. "Go quickly!" Lugger greeted the stunned female warrior and rushed in first in his chariot. This barracks, which doesn't look too big from the outside, is really quite magical inside. In fact, rather than calling this a barracks, it is better to call it a factory. The things inside were very familiar to Ruger, because there were a lot of equipment with similar functions in his logistics space. Yes, this is indeed an arsenal building. The equipment is pretty much the same, but in terms of precision or form, Ruger's is more advanced, but there's not much difference in nature. But there is one aspect in which the two sides are completely different, and that is workers. In Ruger's logistics space, several small industrial robots and a large industrial robot for hoisting are busy. And it is operated under the program of the main control computer. But here, the busy people are half-orcs wearing special exoskeletons and metal helmets. Seeing the two people rushing in, these semi-mechanical and semi-biological slave workers seemed to be unaware and were still busy on the production line. The various World War II era guns and artillery shells they produced were loaded into large logistics supply ammunition boxes by specialized staff. Those ammunition boxes were eventually placed on several transport vehicles with only chassis. Ammunition factory, this is exactly an ammunition production line. Luger was watching with interest when he heard the female warrior suddenly come to the side of the chariot and said, "Look, do the things on them look like the zombies before?" Powered exoskeletons, the powered exoskeletons on these guys are exactly like the ones on mecha zombies. More than just powered exoskeletons, look at them. They only know how to move repeatedly. Isn't it more like a walking zombie than a zombie? Ruger also joked. But all said and done, the two are still very different in details. The mecha zombies that had attacked them with various small weapons did not wear metal helmets on their heads that looked like some kind of brainwashing device. In addition, the exoskeleton of mecha zombies should be thicker. The most important point is that the zombies have power devices on their exoskeletons, and the exoskeletons on these orc workers are just pure exoskeletons. Rather than being exoskeletons, they are more like cages that bind the orc workers in place. If these half-orc laborers are like their gun-toting relatives outside, their brains, which are only a few years old, may go wrong at any time. So with this set of exoskeletons, even if they are really convulsed and want to run and jump around wildly, they can't leave their posts at all. Once their brains are gone, their bodies will be firmly nailed in place. Thinking about it, it's quite miserable. At least it's much worse than the mecha zombies. It can only be said that the exoskeletons of these half-orc workers and those of the mecha zombies are mostly two branches of the same technical line. That's all. What should we do? Leave these guys here? The female warrior nodded and asked again. Luger thought for a moment and slowly shook his head. No, if they receive an order soon and pick up the explosives on the production line and smash them towards us, we won't be able to bear it. Then, Simba, can you suppress their helmets to prevent them from receiving external signals? Hearing this, Laoneokeo flew out with a loud sound, and soon came back, nodding to him first, then shaking his head. The thing on their heads only has a simple receiving function and can only receive simple commands such as 1234. But what these 1234s represent has actually been input into the helmet. The person who controls them only needs to keep issuing those simple 1234 commands to trigger the corresponding commands in the metal hat and then control those guys. In theory, as long as their hats are destroyed, the controller's restraint on them should be broken. But the hat is installed in their brains, and many structures are connected to their own flesh and blood. If the hat is destroyed, they themselves will not survive. So, I can suppress the control signals sent by their controllers to them for a period of time, but I can't suppress it permanently. After a pause, Laokoyo said again, if you ask me, it's better to blow them all to death with one shot. Anyway, they can't be saved. At least this is simple, convenient, and efficient. Ruger nodded after hearing this. In fact, he came to the same conclusion halfway through. Anyway, these are just biochemical beast-headed people created by Gaime. Although they look like humans, they are another species after all. Even if they are now used as slave laborers, the enemy of the enemy is not necessarily a friend. Ruger does not think he has the ability to save their species, so it is better to send them to rest. Instead of making some meaningless attempts, it is better to simply exchange them for points and convert them into his own combat power. It can also be regarded as letting these enslaved orcs participate in his battle against Gaime to some extent, which is indirectly avenging himself.